Thank you, Chair, Ranking Member McGovern, and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify on H.R. 8205, Keeping Violent Offenders Off Our Streets Act, otherwise known as Charitable Bail Funds Bill. This bill defines the posting of a cash bail by a corporate, nonprofit, or for-profit entity as engaged in the business of insurance, which is the most important thing, subjecting them to federal insurance laws and the criminal fraud statutes, which has been the focus of the bill. The use of crowdsourcing, which is just a different way of explaining kind of the charitable bail funds, which there might be questions on. It's been scrutinized by the courts already, and I guess you could say that the concern is what is the true source of the funds. The charitable bail funds has been seen as an easy way to maybe legitimize some monies that would otherwise be rejected by the court due to its likely unknown linkage to any type of activity that would otherwise be frowned on by the court. And that's because if there is little or no relationship between the defendant and those supplying the money, the bail money provides no incentive to prevent the defendant from simply fleeing the jurisdiction, as we're all familiar with. This is especially true if the money does not have to be returned at any point. Charitable bail funds generally flew kind of under the radar, and then in 2020, with the riots that happened in Minneapolis, it ballooned because there were so many people contributing to these funds nationwide. What used to be kind of community-based small organizations that help post bail for nonviolent misdemeanors has now grown into a multi-million-dollar industry. In the example that I just cited, Minnesota Freedom Fund saw revenues increase by 18,000% between 19 and 20. It went from basically hundreds of thousands of dollars to in excess of $40 million this last time around in 2020. The funds are nearly indistinguishable from crowdsource websites. So crowdsourcing is a GoFundMe page where anybody can log in and simply make a donation. There's no tracking of the dollars. That's different than what you're seeing with the charitable bail funds right now, which there is a contribution being made and there's expectations about where that money will go and how it will be used. And then the money is returned if in fact the person is done with the legal process. In 2021, for example, the Minnesota Freedom Fund released a domestic abuser back on the street. 2 weeks later, the man, George Howard, was charged with second-degree murder for a road rage incident. According to an investigation conducted in Hennepin County, Minnesota, the Minnesota Freedom Fund has bailed out at least 65 defendants who were awaiting trial on felony charges involving violence or physical threats or sex crimes. In Indiana, of the roughly 1,000 defendants released on bail supplied by the Bail Project between 2019 and 2021, 24% had previously been charged with a crime of violence. 35% were accused of felony charges and had a previous charge of at least one crime of violence. And because these funds are crowdsourced, or, if they're not couched into some type of charitable bail fund, it's very difficult to track who is donating this money. According to CNN, that did an in-depth report on this, nearly 42% of the roughly 500 defendants bailed out by the Minnesota Freedom Fund later failed to appear, period. They just don't show up. So it's another dynamic, I think, that a lot of people aren't aware of once they see kind of what some of the bail projects have been involved in, or certainly charitable bail projects. Commercial bail companies, by comparison, had a failure to appear rate of only 22% during that same period. So states that still have the bail bondsman type of system, it's a far lower amount that don't show. And this is why many states have begun regulating using charitable bail funds. Congressman, in your state of Georgia, for example, they have now limited the amount of cash bonds a charitable bail fund can pay in a given year. And like I said, in Indiana, where they had prohibited the use of charitable bail funds from posting bail for violent offenders, they now made other changes to their state statute. So there has been a state-by-state approach that probably ultimately will make a difference. But when we introduced this bill last Congress, and we made some significant changes to it since then, I think the bill makes it makes a small but important change to our criminal code to define bail bonds as an insurance product. That's all it does. That's all we're doing here. It just identifies it as an insurance product. And this is something that came from a district attorney within my own state who said there needs to be something in place kind of nationwide to deal with this issue. So under the Federal Comprehensive Crime Act of 1994, this change would also bring charitable bail funds under state insurance regulation. So everyone has a state insurance commissioner, something similar. It's either a one-person commissioner or some type of board that oversees that. What we're simply asking for is that these, whether it be the charitable bail funds would fall underneath that insurance commissioner, so they could oversee it and say, yes, there's issues, or we believe that everything about this charitable bail fund is on the up and up. That's all we're trying to do. The bill merely says that if you are operating as a non-for-profit with the purpose of posting cash bail, you should be subjected to the same regulation and oversight requirements as those operating as a for-profit entity. This will bring needed oversight to organizations that for years have gone unregulated now, while ensuring accountability of these funds by subjecting them to federal insurance fraud statutes. That's all this does. I know there's been other comments about the bill that people are reading further into it or making judgments about this goes too far or interferes with the state insurance program. It does not. It does not interfere with that. So I think this will bring needed oversight to the organizations that for years have gone unregulated, completely unregulated, while ensuring accountability of these funds by subjecting them to federal insurance fraud statutes if they misappropriate funds or misrepresent the use of these funds. And I yield back.